Hey, welcome to the 428th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patron Robin DeVernon Writing. Check out his work on Instagram. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Oren Kaplan. And today we finally have Scott Feinstein on the podcast. He is a guy that we have mentioned his existence for some time, just like haphazardly. We didn't really know who he was, but a couple of our friends had worked with him, and his job is to, well, his service, I don't even say it's a job because it's kind of something he invented.
Yeah.
The service he offers is if you are a director and you are trying to sign a contract with a production company so that they can represent
a commercial director, we're saying. Yeah.
The commercial or music video director, and you're trying to sign a contract with a commercial production company, he will help you get the most bang for your buck. He'll help you get a good day rate, help you get a good profit participation, help you make sure you're not tying yourself up for more time than you need to or that you can't get out of. He's just super knowledgeable. He's been in the business for a long time.
35 years. 35 years.
35 years. But he said he retired like 20 years ago from his first business. So I guess he did that for 15 years. Yeah. He's kind of one of these guys that I think is like very successful. So he tried to just like retire, but then probably has an addiction to work like many of us.
Yeah. I had such a blast talking to Scott. It was great. Honestly, got me excited about commercial filmmaking again in a certain sense. Like I love these sorts of conversations where it's optimistic in a lot of ways, right? It's aspirational, right? We do talk a lot about the big companies and the big paychecks and all of this stuff. And so, that's a bit of a caveat that like Scott is in a premium position where we talk about it, he's far enough downstream that like if you're unsigned or et cetera, like there's only a certain point where he can be helpful. And it's when a person is at a point in their career where they should be negotiating with a production company, right? So if you're not there yet, I think there's plenty to learn, but like, he's for a certain type of director, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And both you and I have been, we've been freelance, we've been assigned on rosters, we've been on exclusive rosters and non-exclusive rosters. And I think most directors try to go from company to company and try to get to like a slightly better company and get more work and make better work in each new company. And so if you're ever in that place where you are signing a deal with the company, whether he kind of specializes in the union, big companies, but he said he's worked with some non-union companies as well. Pre-DGA, I know it's a term that isn't used nearly as much as pre-WGA, but it is it's still a term.
I'm going to go out on a limb, Oren, and say two hyperbolic things. Starting with the more pessimistic one, and then we'll go from there. If you are not interested in commercial filmmaking, skip this episode. It is just for commercial directors, but I would say that it is perhaps the most valuable conversation we've had if you are interested in commercial directing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one thing we do kind of delve into quite a bit is like how much commercial directors are paid, how they make money.
Yeah.
And I do think any director that wants to be a director for the rest of their life as their main source of income, unless you become like a Spielberg, or you're like more of a writer that directs sometimes, like you're going to kind of go into traditional narrative system. But, even the Scorseses and stuff, and again, like a Catherine Bigelow or Ava DuVernay, they're all directing commercials.
Yeah,
right?
Scorsese did a freaking Squarespace commercial. Right. Like the state of the industry right now is that like,
I mean, David Fincher like kind of did a million commercials as he was making Aliens and stuff. Right.
Well, sure. That's different because that was back in the day. I'm saying now most people have to supplement with commercial directing.
Yeah. I can't tell you how often I hear David Gordon Green's name come up in pitching commercials. And Derek Cianfrance is like now this big commercial director. The guy made Blue Valentine, and you think like, oh, this guy wins like Toronto, Cannes, works with the biggest stars.
Brand.
Ryan Gosling movies.
David Gordon Green and Jody Hill, I think, are both great examples of like dudes who have figured out how to make television shows for HBO for like a decade with their best friends. If you could be like, hey, what's the fantasy of like filmmaking as a career? Like, oh, I get to remake my favorite horror movies, and then I get to make a comedy with my best friends where we kind of do whatever the heck we want for HBO, and then we win some awards. You're sitting pretty, and those dudes are still doing commercials as well. And that's because it's great and it's lucrative, right?
And it's fast.
Yeah.
Like you get the commercial and then you shoot it and then you go on with your merry way, after 2 days of shooting.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty excellent. So look, there's a lot of reasons to love commercial directing. We talk about it for 428 episodes. So if you are on the fence, listen to this episode. But if you are in the tank, if you are a commercial director, I think that this is going to be a really great episode for you. I had a great time. I'm really grateful to have had this conversation, and I think you guys are going to like it.
I'm hoping people that are even just very peripherally interested in commercial directing will listen to this. It's a little dense on business side, but I love it. It's just something that's been on my mind. And I think Scott is just like such a funny, interesting guy that knows the commercial business really well from a director's point of view.
Not only is it nutrient dense, but it was really fun. He's a funny guy. It's great. Patreon.com/justshootitpod is the place where you can go and support the show a little bit.
I think we have some ads that are automatically injected, but we've kind of been doing less sponsorships lately. So Patreon is really the main thing that
keeps the show going. Yeah.
Pay everyone. And we really hope you will check it out. We really appreciate it. Dude, we got to do a live show soon. Let's is it? June?
It's June. We should do another one
Summer show.
Yeah, bud.
We should go back to the Sawhorse house.
You want to?
Swim party /
It's
live
a pool
show.
Party!
Yeah, Evan will make us sign all sorts of releases. Patreon.com/justshootitpod. Even $1 a month gets us super stoked and excited that you are listening and supporting the podcast. People like Robin DeVernon Writing from across the world is supporting us. Writers, directors, if you feel like you get anything out of this show, please let us know. If you're a producer on a job I'm working on right now, I'm talking to you, Kelly Christensen. You told me you listen to the podcast.
Shout out Kelly Christensen.
See if you'll become a patron. We should just call out people that have told us they listen to the podcast.
Just putting people on blast. Yeah. Okay.
Anyhow, $1, $2, $20, we appreciate it all. Thanks for listening. Enjoy this episode with Scott Feinstein. Okay, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Scott Feinstein on the podcast. Welcome, Scott.
Welcome, Scott.
Well, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I think, Scott, of all the people we've had, this is 430 something episodes, give or take, you are the person who needs work the least of any person we've talked to on this podcast.
That is true. I was even reticent to come on this because I don't really need more work.
So nobody hit up Scott.
No, you can hit him up.
Hit him up. Yeah, hit him up.
But,
you're a busy guy.
I want to tell the story real quick of how I met Scott.
Oh, yeah.
I told you, Matt, which is that two of our friends and past guests, Carlin Hudson and Jessica Sanders, both said you must talk to Scott before you sign any contract with a production company. This is a must thing. You would be an idiot to not do it. Of course, you have to pay him. It's going to, charge an hourly rate, but there's no chance that you will not make more money because you spoke to him. Like Scott himself said he's worth about 1,000 times what you pay him. So I hadn't used him, but I mentioned his existence on this podcast multiple times because Jessica and Carlin told us about him. And people started randomly reaching out to me through the podcast saying, hey, who's this guy? Can I have his contact info? So I gave your contact info out to a couple people. Turned out that, Scott emailed me. He said, hey, I've been hearing your name. Some people were referred to me by you, and I have no idea who you are. And so I looked you up, and I have some thoughts on your potential directing contract. Give me a call. So anyhow, I actually met Scott through the podcast, through talking about you on the podcast.
So funny.
And now we need to start talking about, Barack Obama, Steven Spielberg.
No connections. No way I can help you with them.
Yeah.
Okay. So Scott, what do you do? How
do you describe your profession?
I tell people what I do is I will help negotiate a commercial production contract. And I actually explain that because I get kids from right out of school occasionally who say, how can you help me? And I say, well, I don't really find directors, first of all, work through production companies, and they sign a contract typically with that production company to do commercial and video work exclusively through them. So my job.
When you say video work, you mean music videos?
Music videos, yeah. Sorry, music video work. And those companies get the exclusive right to represent that director for all commercials and music videos within a certain geographic region. It can be the US and Canada, it can be worldwide. And then in not all the cases where I represent a director, the director gets a day rate, an amount for shooting a commercial daily, and then a piece of the actual profit on a commercial. Frankly, I tell every director, don't hire me. You don't need to spend money on me if the company's not going to offer you profits in the commercial. So what my job, and I've been doing it for 35 plus years. So I have a background in entertainment business management. I had a company years ago. It's actually kind of interesting, probably the basis for how I learned this business. I had 600 entertainment clients. I love cinematography, and I had a company that represented a lot of cinematographers. They started referring me to directors who they worked for. And the directors would call me and say, can you help us? And I got hired by a very big production company at the time called GMS. And this was, again, 35 plus years ago. And I started helping them with some business details, and I started learning about the commercial production business. And then I started realizing,
literally when Oren and I were dreaming of becoming commercial directors, you know what I mean? Like 35 years ago, that's kind of like, that's the sweet spot, right? Yeah. That's the heyday of music videos and commercials.
I go back that far when markups used to be 40%, when I'll be honest with you, it was like printing money in the production business.
Yeah.
So what's a markup? Can you tell us?
Markup back then was 40%.
No, but what does that word mean?
Okay. So markup is the profit that the companies make on a job. So you take your production costs and you say the markup is 40%, you multiply that number by 40%. So if a job had $400,000 in production costs, a 40% markup would be a $160,000 markup. That's in theory what the production company would make if it came in on budget.
Right.
Okay. If that needs any clarifications, let me know. But that's the general concept. That's their profit margin. So back then, everybody was cleaning up. I mean, companies were making a fortune. Everybody was doing well. And what's obviously transpired over the years is the agencies have put a big pinch on that markup number. So where years ago it was 40, it went to 38, it went to 35, it went to 32, it went to 30, it went to 28, and now it's 25. And there's a squeeze on that 25. So now on a $400,000 production budget, while they were making $160,000, they're working with usually a starting figure of $100,000 or less.
Right. So just to clarify, the agencies are the ones that are hiring production companies to make the commercials. The agencies come up with the campaign, right? They work with the clients. They say, Coca-Cola, this is, we're going to market your new soda for kids. This is what it's going to, and
that's
we want to
juice, Oren.
We're getting $1 million and we're going to spend half of it making a commercial.
Correct.
So we're going to spend $500,000 to make this commercial.
Correct.
And these companies that are bidding to make the commercial, that are competing to get that business, are trying to spend $400,000 of the money on the actual commercial so they can keep $100,000.
Correct.
Right? 20%, 25%.
To take it one step further, what they'll do is they'll send it out to bid to a variety of different directors. As you guys know, there may be 10 or 15 directors who they like their style of work. They'll send, I assume, do they actually send storyboards, or the storyboards done by they actually send, they have a storyboard artist at the agency who works on it?
Sometimes an agency person will just Photoshop something, or a lot of AI stuff now.
So but like 3 or 4 frames, not like the full spot.
Okay. And
well, actually, sometimes more.
Okay. And to take a step back, there are actually what we call sales reps. So there are people who represent salesmen, basically, who represent the production company, and they'll usually interface with the salespeople. So the agency will interface with the salespeople, and the salespeople will say, look, we have these directors, we represent these companies, we think they would do a good job with your concept. So they send them to a variety of different production companies for a variety of different directors to bid on the work, to get to it, either enhance the agency creative's idea or just to get their opinion and work out how they're going to lay the job out, how they would actually produce the job.
That's kind of how the waterfall goes, right? Coca-Cola hires Chiat Day, who hires the rep to introduce them to MJZ, who decides to bid with Tom Kuntz, and then they get the commercial. And where you fit in is how much of that money that goes to MJZ, of that $500,000, goes to Tom Kuntz, the director.
A client of mine, by the way. Just throw that in, Tom Kuntz. Been a client of mine. By the way, been a client of mine for, he and I go way back. It's got to be 20-some years ago now.
Yeah, and he's like become kind of a legendary, commercial director. Directed the Old Spice, the "Man Your Man Can Be" campaign.
Yeah, he and actually Michael
many others.
It was originally Kuntz and McGuire. So a lot of people probably in the last 10, 15 years aren't aware that he had a partner. And so I negotiated their first deal at MJZ. When Spike went there, Dante Orioli went there, and somebody else, but I can't remember what it was. So yes, you've got the waterfall correct. And then, by the way, 35 years ago, the profit sharing to directors was a lot smaller too. So the companies actually made more money. So when I first got in the business, there were a lot of directors who never had profit sharing. And it was discussed. And I couldn't tell you with certainty because I didn't have as many directors, nearly as many then as I have now, how many actually had it. But I would say there was a decent number, but certainly many that didn't. So I think what happened is as word got out that more and more directors were getting profit sharing, it did spread. And there became a fairly sizable competition between directors, between companies for directors. I think it's somewhat very well known. I'm speaking out of turn. The David Zander, and I think it's actually a brilliant move by David Zander. He paid extremely large bonuses to get these 5 or 6 directors on his roster. It's what made him. He recognized that if I could attract
and his company is MJZ.
MJZ,
He's the Z of Zander.
Yeah, Morton Jankel Zander is what it stands for. He paid 7-figure bonuses to get these group of directors to come over, and it pretty much put him on the map. And I suspect this made him a very wealthy man between you and I.
And a lot of them are still there, right? Like Tom Kuntz has been there for many years.
A lot of them are still there. So I think, and then I negotiated a contract for a gentleman named Marcus Spell, who was the biggest biller probably ever. I believe he had a year in which he billed like 30 million. And again, I don't think I'm talking out of, he's retired now. As far as I know, he hasn't worked. I haven't spoken to him in several years, but he ended up getting the richest deal ever. And the actual deal, while I'm not comfortable talking about it on the show, it got around how rich it was and how big it was. It was worth millions to him. And he used to brag about, I think, how the kind of deal I got him, that led to my gates just opened for my services.
So you're the guy who brokers this deal. Word gets out. Hey, people are passing around $1 million bonuses. We got to call Scott. Yeah.
And I want to pump the brakes just for a second. This is actually, believe it or not, and I don't know, I think Matt is kind of in the same boat as me, but we're kind of like, even though we've been directing what we call branded content for many years, the kind of traditional commercial world we've kind of just flirted with and worked in, just the last, 5 to 6 years. And so, I think Matt and I both were not really privy to even profit sharing. I mean, we knew we'd heard this term, but we actually hadn't been sharing.
It was just my last company that they brought up profit sharing. And I was like, cool, that sounds whatever, man.
I was talking to today, who's the director. I was talking to Win Bates, who's at Tool. And he said, what do people do if they don't have you? I said, I don't know that because I don't know what their contracts look like. But I suspect there are a lot of directors out there who are doing good billing and don't have profit sharing. In fact, I actually got a director a couple of weeks ago. First, he got handed a contract, and the contract said he doesn't get any profit sharing for the first $3 million in billing on a $3 million on a 3-year contract. So he'd have to do over $9 million of billing. And I'm going, and he's doing like $5 million a year. And I go, this is crazy. This is nuts. I can get you profit sharing in any company out there. So a lot of it's naivety. People just don't. Sure. I mean, to be totally candid with you, there are 2 or 3 attorneys out there who understand these deals. There are a couple CPAs out there who understand these deals. None of them do it for a living, though. None of them. I mean, they may do a contract here or there. I'll give credit to a couple of the people who represent companies like Roberta Wolf. Roberta Wolf still represents, I believe, the AICP, which is the professional organization for commercial production companies. A guy named Richard Pozell, a guy Mike Nadler in New York. They do it, but they don't really do it as a main business. And as of 14 years ago, when I actually sold my big company, I started doing this kind of part-time just to make some extra money and have something to do. Now it's exploded into a kind of a full-time thing for me again. So it's again a question of, you didn't know. How would you know? Unless
and it's something that people don't. I talked to you about this, Scott. I Googled online, like, show me what a standard contract between a director and a commercial production company looks like. And there's nothing to be found.
I think there's also something to be said about, like, the way that Oren and I came up is kind of different from the generation that you're describing, where we freelanced for years and years and years. And in the digital marketplace before, like, branded content, when Oren, you're describing branded content, you're talking about like us doing, sketches sponsored by Doritos for Funny or Die,
like viral
or
videos
and stuff like that. So just literally a totally different ecosystem with companies, run by 32-year-olds who didn't know better either, and didn't know what the markup could be, frankly. You know what I mean? None of those companies are really around anymore. And it's partially because they cannibalized the advertising marketplace and all sorts of other stuff, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. But so the point is like, the world that we grew up in, none of our peers were even aware of profit sharing either. Like, if one person had been like, "Hey, did you guys know I make 20% on the markup or whatever?" We'd be like, "Huh? What do you mean?"
Well, I wanted to, the one other thing I wanted to clarify that you mentioned a couple of times, Scott, is when you're saying someone is billing 3 million, 5 million, 9 million, 30 million. So in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, that means that the revenue you've brought in, is that you've booked $3 million worth of jobs in the year, right? So let's say you join a company.
Production budgets, yes.
Not production budgets, total budgets, right?
Well,
how much the agency is giving.
Total of all the jobs you've done. The total value of all the jobs you've done is 3 million or 5 million. That
including the markup.
Yeah, including the markups. The total value of the money the company, or the total money received by the company. Now, I won't get into. There are legal nuances to how companies like to define total billing, but I'm not going to get into that. Generally speaking, it is. By the way, that's one of the reasons people hire me. There's even, it's gotten so technical, unfortunately, that now I'm spending time arguing over what billing is. And they'll say, billing is this, this, and this, but it's not this, this, and this. And I go, why? That's part of billing. That's what every other industry considers billing, is what you sell the product for. And the companies are manipulating a lot of the numbers. Now, again, they're doing that because the markups have been pushed down. They need to make sure that, by the way, to digress for 1 second, the importance of that number is that usually as you bill more, your profit percentage increases. So they may pay you 25% of the first 3 million in billing, and then 30% on 3 to 5, and then over 5 million they'll give you 35%. So they don't want it to go up any higher than they have to let it go. They don't want to go up any faster, should we say.
Sure. So they're incentivized to keep that number small.
Smaller if they can.
Because they don't know also how much, when a company signs a new director, right? They're trying to get that director jobs, but they don't know how many jobs they'll get, right? Absolutely. It could be 0 jobs. It could be 20 jobs.
No guarantee, which is something we should get into, and I'll bring it up later about these are our legal contracts. Directors are obligated, but companies are not. And I'll explain to you later on why I make that statement. There's some interesting nuances. But going back to your point about freelance directors.
Sorry, before you do that, one kind of technical question. Is talent part of the that total budget?
It's a very good question. That's one of the little nuances that comes into play. There are certain items that were very common. Talent was very common. Editorial. When I first got into the business, the agency would pay the production company, and the production company would pay the editorial house. And they would mark that up. They would make money off of that process. They'd get a handling fee. for doing it. Now that's not near as common. So talent sometimes is often paid directly by the agency or by the client. I actually don't even know who pays, but it's not the production company. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is.
Gotcha. But so that wouldn't be you. So say a celebrity comes in and they're going to make $6 figures.
$1 million.
You're not getting any taste of that.
No, very, very rarely. But going back to your point, which is a really good one, it used to be that people were freelance. And there are still people who call me, well, is there a way to me to get profit participation when I'm doing freelance work? I get that. Because a lot of people say, I don't want to have my locked up with one company. What happens if that one company can't find me work?
Sure.
Legitimate issue. The answer is no. I doubt you'll find people who will give you profit participation if you're freelance because you're not committing to them. That's the one thing they give you by you making a commitment to them. That, in theory, is what happens.
Right. Unless you bring the job, right?
Yes and no. Those are, I would say if you bring a company a big enough job and you say, I want part of the profits on the job, there's a reasonable chance they'll give you that. But that's probably rare, relatively rare. I don't run into a lot of that. I do run into a lot. What I'm running into more now is a lot of directors will sign with a company and then they say, I want the right to do client direct work. Meaning, if a client comes to me, they're not going to an agency, they're not hiring a production company, can I do the work for them? Some companies will say, I have one right now that said, that's fine as long as it's a small budget item. If it's a large budget commercial, then we'd like to have the opportunity to try to do it with you. Others will say, if it's a major client, we don't want you doing it because we want them, if they want you, we want them to kind of force them to go through an agency and to hire you. So, a lot of companies now will say, fine, if it's a client direct work and it helps your reel, meaning it puts work on your reel that we can use to get you future work, we're okay with it. It's a little bit, it's become really common in the last few years, particularly during the pandemic. It started to pick up even more.
But do you think, Scott, it's become really common because of directors like Matt and myself who, back in the day, right, 10 years ago, you would get a minimum guarantee, right? They're like, hey, we're going to give you just $100,000 or $50,000 to be on the roster, whether you get any work or not. And so you feel like you will not starve. By being committed. But nowadays, there's no guarantees. The guarantee is zero. So when we haven't worked for 3 months because we pitched on 2 jobs and we didn't get them, and now we're like trying to figure out how to pay for food, we have to say, hey, we're directors. We're not working. We got to find some other directing work.
Ironically, I got the first contract what's today, Monday? Yeah, last Tuesday or Wednesday with somebody who was offered a guarantee of. I know I haven't seen a guarantee in a while. I think it was 70. I think it was 75,000 a year. Yeah, 75,000 a year. Now I'm going to address this issue right now because it's perfect time for it. This issue about contracts being an obligation by the director, but not a legal obligation by the production company. And this actually relates to the issue of a guarantee. So I always tell every director, they say, is it a legal contract? Or I get the constant, it's a 2-year contract, but I can leave if I'm unhappy. I go, no, there's no happiness clause in there. There's no obligation for the company to make you happy. Directors can have really tough personalities at times. They can be miserable. They can be miserable even if they're making $10 million a year. That's not an issue. Conversely, if a company wants to get rid of you, they can. And they're like, well, how can that be? I'm obligated to them. They're not obligated to me. And I say, because you can't force a company to sell you. So if a company 2 years in, 1 year, 6 months into a deal says, you know what, we can't sell you. You're out of here. And you say, but wait a second, we have a guarantee. No, can't help you. Now, when you add a guarantee to the contract, now a company still has an obligation to pay that guarantee. Right? Because now there's a financial obligation as part of the contract. Now, some lawyers will tell you I'm wrong, that their companies, but I mean, the simple truth is, and I think every director at heart knows, if a company tells their rep, don't push this director. We don't have a lot of confidence in him. You can't make a company keep you. So it's a really important concept. It's something I really put in the head of all directors, is that when you think about the contract you're going to agree to, I literally had a conversation today, and I said, and he's been billing fairly well. And I said, let me ask you a question. What happens if your billing drops down to under 2 million? Are you going to be able to pay your bills? And he said, no, that's going to be tough. I said, then let's get something in the contract that says if after your first year you've done less than 2 million in billing, you have the right to terminate the contract. Doesn't mean you have to. There may be an He actually asked somebody, he said, what happens if it's my fault? And I said, well, again, it's not an obligation to terminate the contract. It's a right to. And I think it's important because if it's your fault that you haven't done the billing, then if it's a slow period in the market, then you don't worry about it. But if it's because they brought in a director that competes with you, or the executive producer, like what happens if the executive producer who brought you there and you've bonded with leaves? You're still committed. That's the thing I need directors to understand, which is they can do whatever they want, but you can't.
Companies can do whatever they want.
Absolutely. There's nothing in this contract that says they have to have the same reps, they have to have the same executive producer, they can't bring in directors. Because I promise you, you guys may be good directors, but if there's a director who's interested in them with the identical work as yours, but they bill 10 million a year and you bill 3 million a year, trust me, they're signing them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that kind of brings up a question that Oren and I talk about all the time, right? Like there are houses where, because we're both comedy directors, there are houses where they're known, Hungry Man, right?
Yeah.
Our heroes are all, like it's a murderer's row of awesome directors.
Yeah.
In your opinion, is it better to be at a house that's known for the sort of work that you do?
And just by house, you mean company, right?
Company. Yeah, company. But where you are not the brand name, or is it better to be the only comedy director on an otherwise serious roster, let's say? Right.
That's a proverbial question that comes up constantly. And the answer is, let's go with one basic premise I tell people. Regardless of the directors that exist at that company right now, no company offers you a contract unless they truly believe you will be a decent biller, right? Sure. David Zander or Patrick Millingsmith is not going to make an offer to a director to proverbial throw the shit against the wall. He has to believe in that director. He has to believe he's going to get that director work. So that's a given I always tell directors. Now, the next question is, do you want the best work, the opportunity to get the best work out there, or are you willing to accept the work that maybe the best director can't do because it's either not great for them creatively or they're busy, and maybe pick up some of that work? That's the advantage of going companies where the company's other directors that are similar to your work. The disadvantage is that you won't get the best of work because that's going to go to the top directors at those companies. So the answer is there is no easy answer. A lot of that has to deal with your own self-confidence, director self-confidence, and the director's willingness to compete. I don't know if David Zander still does this, but he used to willingly say, I don't care if the directors in my own company compete for the same jobs. Let them all, I don't care. They have a right to let them. Whoever gets it, gets it. Well, obviously he makes money either way, but I think his idea is that I have a bunch of really great directors. Let him, whoever wins out has a right to do it, should do it. So I personally am a big fan of companies that don't have as many directors doing the same kind of work. It's easier to lay blame when it can't be, you can't point the finger of everything's going to other directors. Versus a company that has, you may be the only one or one of only two that does it. Then it's a little easier to analyze. Unfortunately, this is a terrible thing to say, but directors rarely blame the company when it's not working well, and they give themselves credit when it's going well.
Sure.
It's like stockbrokers. When the market's doing great, it's it's them. When the market's going bad, it's the broker's an idiot. It's a little bit that way in the commercial production world too. But I actually like smaller companies for that reason. I think smaller companies are a lot hungrier. They can work with smaller budgets. They're willing to do whatever it takes to get a job. There are companies that say, we're not going to do a job for less than a 23% markup, or 20% markup. Where companies that are smaller, if they keep their overhead down, which is really the big push in the last couple of years, is to keep your overhead down. There used to be these, like MJZ had big offices, Radical Media. A lot of these companies had very large offices. They're pulling away from that because they want to be able to accept jobs that don't necessarily add a lot to their bottom line, but they just could creatively. The other problem is that, and it's probably the overall reason why people leave companies, is that everybody wants to do great work, right? And nobody wants to do shitty work. But unfortunately, there's 3 reasons to do a job. 1 for the creative, 2 for the relationship, and 3 for the money. If you have all 3, you hit a home run. That's about 1 out of every 10 jobs. So that's a formula that I put together in my own brain. These are the 3 things I hear from directors. There aren't that many of those. So accept the fact that you're going to do a lot of mediocre work, and you hope you get that 1 or 2 out of every 10. And you may not, but you're making a living at it, and you're hopefully, you'll have a long career. Hopefully you'll transition to the higher level of work over a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to dissect here.
I know there is just a lot.
Scott, we could have you on for a week straight.
It's a lot.
It's truly wonderful. Yeah.
I think we talked a lot. Like when I switched companies from Great Guns to Art Class, I was kind of the main comedy guy on the Great Guns roster. And when I went to Art Class, the EP there said to me, I was very worried about it. I'm going to be competing with the owner of the company as a comedy director. There's a lot of comedy directors on the roster. I said, how am I going to get work? And she said, but people are coming to us for comedy. So we have more comedy work.
That is an argument
than we have directors to do. People aren't really necessarily going to Great Guns. They're not thinking of it as like a US comedy house. So it's not on that list of, hey, here's a bunch of comedy shops,
Positive people go to for comedy, Tool people go to for comedy,
Biscuit.
Smuggler people go to something for a year, and they have a lot of European style directing. It's a little different. You're right. I mean, that is a sound argument. My argument would be, it really gets down to the reps though, too. Like I always tell directors, this is another thing that astonishes me in the business. I'll get a director and I'll say, because typically they now call me, I don't find homes for people anymore. I don't have the time for it. So I only take on directors if they have a place in mind, they've got a contract in hand. And I always say to them, so did you talk to all the reps? No, I talked to one of them. Why didn't you? The reps are the ones that are selling you. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that the company owner likes you, but they're not the ones that's selling you. It's the reps. So you have to make sure you spoke to all the reps. You have to make sure that you feel the passion they have for you. And if they don't waste your time.
Can I ask you, what are the words that you would say to get the conversations with these reps?
Well, I usually tell the director, talk to the owner and say, I want to meet all the reps.
Yeah.
I want to either have a face-to-face, Zoom, or whatever, but I want to hear what these reps have in mind to sell me.
Let's say you're not a famous director. Let's say you're not Tom Kuntz or even Nina Meredith.
You're a Madden though.
You're a Madden, and the company is already kind of not 100% sure if, you've been talking to them. You're like, hey, I'd love to work with you. They're like, we think we might be able to do some stuff.
Or I think it's more about the director's confidence in this case, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I think Scott, to your point, their production companies tend to be do or die. It's either like a hell yes or like a fuck off, right?
Yeah. They just say we're not looking for anybody right now. You tell me what this and I'll tell you what it means. And proverbially goes, we like your work a lot, but it just doesn't fit in for us right now. That means they don't like your work.
That's fine. That's the nice way of saying it. They went another direction.
They never know if you're going to be the next Martin Turturro, kind of thing, or Bradford Young, who's hot as can be right now. They never know if you're going to be that. So they don't want to ever say no to you. They don't ever say fuck off, I assume.
Sure.
Right.
But by the way, this raises another really important issue. This more now than ever. You being a great salesman yourself is crucial. There was the day I mentioned Marcus Nispel. Man, he could be brutal to work for. He had a 70-page manual. It was well known within you called the.
He was a director on EP.
Yeah, he was a director. He had a book 70 pages long on how he's to be treated on jobs.
Really?
And he didn't want talent talking to him. I never read the whole thing. It's called the Manifesto. You can probably still find it online. He was at RSA most of his career. He was also at MJZ. But I really liked the guy, but a lot of people didn't. But nowadays, you can't get away with treating like you're some spoiled baby.
Sure.
You gotta schmooze the agency people. You gotta schmooze the clients. That's how you get work nowadays. So,
Scott, just a correction, just because you deal with legal things. According to Daily Variety, it's a 64-page manifesto.
Oh, you found it, huh? That's funny. Yeah, 64 pages. I guess like the temperature in his car had to be at a certain temperature. And his coffee had to. I hear that. I never read the whole thing. I didn't really care. And Marcus was a great guy, a brilliant man, by the way, Rhodes Scholar. But anyway, look, I think you have to push. In order, it's an observation I've made over the years. Good directors have a tremendous amount of confidence. Mm-hmm. They know what they're doing. They control the environment. They have belief in themselves, justified or not. They have a belief in themselves. It's really important.
90% of our listeners just said, I guess I'm not going to be a good director. I thought we're all supposed to have imposter syndrome.
The other way around, everyone's like, I got it.
I got it. Yeah, I don't think you go in the field.
They're listening at 2x. They're jogging. It's 4 a.m. Right. Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is that what makes this difficult is that these contracts, every contract's different. The language is wording is different. So what's missing in this industry is the people in the past were primarily, again, who were dealing with these deals, lawyers who had some knowledge of the financial aspects of the world. I came up on the financial side. And in my opinion, again, you may not find, and not everybody will agree with this, these contracts are about the financial aspect of it. Nobody sues anybody in this business. It's very, very rare, very rare. So it's not about the legalese. It's about the financial aspects, the definition of profit, how it's paid, when it's paid. And that can get extremely confusing. And that's the part and that's where I built my market. That's why I've done north of 2,000 contracts, because I know I've got contracts in every company. So when a company says, well, that's not in any of our contracts, and I'm like, I've actually had that happen. Somebody new comes on board and they'll say, I'll question some points in the contract. And they say, no, we don't do that. That's something we would never do for anybody here. And I go, well, that's a little bit of a problem because I have 4 directors there who have that in their contract. And they're like, oh, shit. And they'll go back and they say, oh, nobody warned me. So that's kind of fun, too.
Google me next time, Jared.
One thing, Scott, that you told me that I think is helpful for directors to know is you said that every company will tell the directors when they're negotiating, oh, we give all the directors the same contract.
Yeah.
And then 100% across the board, it's a lie.
Yeah, well, I'm like, first of all, unless you're going to let me see every contract, how you be able to prove that? And I usually say, you know what, I actually don't care what everybody else is. I don't represent everybody else. I represent this person. So we're going to negotiate for this person, and it's based on what I know he has a right to. Now, again, I start off every conversation I have with every EP, executive producer, or anybody I'm negotiating a deal with. It's their company. They have the right to say yes or no. I can't make them do anything they don't want to do. And that's where, in one sense, they have the power. On the other hand, most of the directors who I represent have more than one choice of a company to go to. So it becomes I do not bid out contracts. I'll never negotiate with more than one company at a time. And 99% of the time, the company a director wants to go to, I will make a deal happen.
Right.
Literally 99%.
You did give me one trick that, let me know if you need to edit this out. If this is proprietary. You told me when they tell you, oh, we give every director the same rate, the same contract, the same deal. You said, okay, then ask them to put a favored nation clause in the contract that says no other director will get a better deal than me.
I've said that, and they kind of he and haw. Well, because usually, particularly if there's like an owner director, we clearly know he doesn't have the same thing in his contract. Sure. And usually they're A-level directors. I'll tell you a kind of funny story. Years and years ago, I was at an AICP meeting, again, the professional organization for production companies, and there was a big issue back there because I think it was after David Zander had signed all these big directors. And people are like, it's these big signing bonuses that are destroying the business. And they actually invited me to a meeting to say, we need to standardize contracts. And they said, Scott, you're really hurting the business. These directors are getting too rich of deals. Mm-hmm. So I said, listen to them. I listened to them, and I didn't say much. We left the building, and two owners came up to me and said, just want to let you know privately, if we need to pay a signing bonus, just let us know. We'll be happy to. If you got a really good director. True to God's story. I'm like cracking up. Yeah. So they're willing to stick a knife in each other's back even, and they're trying to stop it from happening. And look, nobody wants to stick a knife in a production company's back. I don't think it's a good idea. I tell all directors. I have directors say, I want to feel like I've gotten the best deal possible, and I don't care if it's painful. Well, I do, because you don't want to work with a company that's signing a deal, agreeing to something because you stuck a knife in their back. Let's make it fair and reasonable. Now, what is fair and reasonable? God only knows. But, I genuinely try to be fair and reasonable. That's why, by and large, most companies are not afraid to hear my voice. Mm-hmm. They know I try to be reasonable. I genuinely do. Yeah. I genuinely do.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, look, you can't burn bridges and also have done north of 2,000 contracts.
Yeah. No, you don't. You want things to be fair. It's just that there's a lot of you're mentioning that you weren't aware of the profit sharing. If the company thinks you are not aware of it, they won't offer it to you.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. We're cutting a pie. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you guys, but I don't really like sharing my pie. I love to gorge that thing all myself. So there's no reason why they want to give you part of their pie.
Right. Unless they're trying to get you from someone else.
Right. Well, that's where it happens.
And then they're like, oh, hey, here's a little bit of pie. So Scott, this is awesome. I'm wondering, we're talking about MJZ and Tool and Biscuit, kind of like these AAA, like the best shops in town.
Right.
But you'd mentioned that you also like working with smaller companies as well. And I imagine all of our listeners, myself included, frankly, we're all salivating at the idea of working with these big companies. But I'm sure there's plenty of people who aren't there in their career yet. Do you know what I mean? Aren't ready to sign with some of those bigger companies. Tell us a little bit more about those smaller shops. Is it the same sort of thing? How do you work with that other tier that we're describing as well?
Well, so it's a good question. And just for people know, I have a lot of very young directors who've done only spec work on their own. Mm-hmm. They don't have they've never done broadcast commercials. Mm-hmm. Or they've done only a few music videos. Mm-hmm.
How do those people even know about that you exist?
Usually because they talk to somebody who knows me.
You mean their dad?
I've worked with. Yeah. No, it's usually they run across somebody within the business. They run across somebody who's done video, music videos. Because I negotiate music video deals too, even though there's not a lot to negotiate there. So, but I get kids out of school. It's a good question. I don't really ask them. I ask most people where they got my name, but it's from a variety of sources. But to answer your question, there are a lot of small companies. In fact, there's a new one. There's a relatively new one, Eleanor, which I believe won Production Company of the Year at one of the recent. I think it was one of the AICP.
Yeah, I think Ad Age called them the production company to watch for 2024.
And it's only been around for, I'm guessing, I may be wrong, but I think only 3 to 4 years. And it's doing well. There's Canada is a company that's only been around it's doing really well.
Canada is awesome stuff.
The answer to that is that it is very hard for new directors with harder now than ever to actually get a contract, to get in with the production. Most of them work for non-union companies because they're not even in the DGA yet. So I deal only with DGA companies. So it is very, very, very difficult. The hopes is that they have some kind of reel, some kind of work. They've done a short, they've done a documentary. I've gotten recently some directors who worked on Saturday Night Live quite frequently, doing pieces on there. That's potential. Or I have one I was helping.
Shout out Tim Wilkheim. Not to blow him up. I said shout out Tim Wilkheim, who's a friend of the show and Drexel on SNL.
Yeah, I get that. I think I got somebody who said they were directing. I have some agency agency creatives who, they get into the business and people hire them because they have great connections to clients in the agency. So that's a good way of getting work over. That's actually fairly common. You'll see a lot of creative people, agency people. You'll find DPs, directors of photography, who get work and then are shooting commercials, and they'll be maybe a car guy who does some really good, look at Bradford Young, who's a cinematographer first at Serial. Yeah. He does, and he won the DGA award for best commercial director, I think last year. And I think he won it on one spot, if I remember correctly, where most everybody submits a couple. And, he's just taken off from what I understand. And he came to me before he had won the award, and we had actually negotiated a deal. And then he won the award, and I went, this contract isn't going to be good anymore. We're going to start over. You just, because that's like the biggest award you can win. So,
which is so funny, like for listener, like he shot solo. Like he Bradford Young was like the hottest cinematographer there for a couple of years. So it's funny to be like, well, now we're talking,
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, a really sweet man too. I mean, just a genuinely pleasant man to work with. So it's, again, new. I would be lying to tell you that breaking into this business without something impressive in your background is extremely difficult. There are no companies I'm aware of that will just take somebody out of school anymore and say, I've done some student film. Let me see what I can do. They just don't, because they're having enough trouble finding work for their guys who they have on their roster. That's the biggest complaint right now. Is that, particularly until like May, nobody was working. First 4 months of this year, people were dying. Yeah. It was not good. Now, there's always work. So I always tell people, I get calls all day long from directors. I say, anybody working out there? Yeah, Dave Myers is working like crazy.
Sure.
He's probably one of the most prolific directors out there right now at Radical Media. But he is one of the most charming people on the planet. Maybe the single most charming director I've ever met. He's just a humble, really nice guy, and he works like crazy. So it's a tough business. I'll say that for anybody who's listening. It's a very difficult business.
So who are these? You mentioned that there's some young people that haven't even really done a lot of big jobs yet. Wait, are they DGA? What companies are they signing at?
A couple of them have been at non-DGA companies. So they built up a reel at their non-DGA companies, and then the DGA companies will see some of their work, or they'll go, there are a couple headhunters for companies. But, a company may see their work somewhere.
Can you tell us about this? Because this is also something, a position that I did not realize existed until about a year ago.
Yeah.
What is this headhunter that you?
Okay. Well, there's two of them that I know of. Raquel Elfasi. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Really, I've worked with her with several directors. She does it for a living. She basically finds homes for directors. I think it's RAQUIL and then Elfasi, ELFASI, I believe. And
is it rdplacement.com?
Yes.
It's funny. I'm looking at this rd-placement.com. Did you click on the clients, Matt?
No, not yet. Let me see.
It's like Directors Bureau, Skunk Division, Furline, RSA, PSYOP, pieces.
Yeah. For the people who are like frantically trying to rewind in the episode, I'm like, what? Who are we talking about again? rd-placement.com is the website that we're talking about. I had no idea this existed. And Scott, full transparency, I'm freelance right now and like kind of hating it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is incredible. This is great news. Yeah.
Let me say, I don't know anything about your work because I haven't seen it, but
it's great.
If it's great, I have no doubt. If it's good work, then there's a likelihood she'll be able to find you a decent home.
Sure. Yeah.
And she's good for that. She knows what she's doing. She's got a lot of experience. She's got a reasonably good eye, I think, for talent. I've begun to develop a decent eye for talent because I've just looked at enough work, but I actually don't even have time anymore to look at work. So that's why I said my best client is one who comes to me and says, Scott, I want to go, I've got a contract in hand. I got a new client today who said, here's the contract I'll send you. I said, I'll get through it I'll review it tomorrow and get you some notes. And, it moves pretty quickly. Once it gets into my hands, I can move this stuff along pretty quickly.
And it sounds, there's two ways you work, right? Either you'll give the director notes and they can take them back to the company, or you can talk to the company directly.
Well, one of I always find amusing things. I'm gonna say something about myself and I'll prove it. That it's not just, my ego doesn't get involved in this. So much so that I tell directors, they don't even have to know about me. I don't care if they know that I exist in this process. I'm happy to.
Companies don't need to know.
I don't know. I don't care. I don't need them. I don't need my name out there every place. So I will often draft the notes. I don't want to say the company because it'll embarrass the person. Everybody knows this company and this executive producer. But I put together a series of notes for a director. And she wrote back something in the notes about, this isn't something we normally do. So I said to the director, I think I'm going to have to talk to her. So I called her up and I said, and she said, shit, I should have known it was you. I thought the notes were awfully detailed. And she goes, okay, just tell me what you want. Yeah, exactly. So I have no problems because in all honesty, and this is again, another thing that directors don't realize. It's much harder for a company to say no directly to a director, yes, than it is to me. Because they're not saying no to your face. So I tell directors, they sometimes can accomplish more than I can. I can put together the notes for you and I can make the comments because you don't know about it. And it's, but they don't really want to, they want you badly if they're making you an offer. They don't want to piss you off any more than you want to piss them off. So if you say, this is what I need in my contract, they're more likely going to accept it than they would if it was coming from me.
That's so fascinating because I was just talking to a friend of mine, a cinematographer friend, who just signed with a new agent, right? And the agent negotiated a rate on something, and I think he and I and Oren, I think you're kind of in the same boat as well. There's a little bit of nice guy, don't want to rock the boat, don't push back. We're just happy to be here kind of mentality that has cost us thousands and thousands of dollars over our careers.
Yeah. Right? I mean, so many directors I know, including myself, have been like, that somebody wants to sign me in. Cool.
I know.
I'm so lucky.
I think it's a funny problem, and I suspect this exists in every environment and every business. It's that wanting to please versus advocating for yourself. And I mean, that's probably one area where I do serve. I am a service that directors like, is they're not great at always advocating for themselves. Sure. And I'll get in there and say, this director's great. He's good. He's he's focused. He wants to make money for you. He wants to do great work. And I have directors who literally say, now, Scott, don't push it too much. I don't want to. I said,
sure.
You have a right to that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then there are others who say, I don't understand why they have any right to make any profit. But by the way, I've literally had directors say to me, it's by the way, those tend to be successful directors who are doing real well. There's a very big director at one company who literally said to me, you know what? I don't understand why they have to make that much money. I bring in all these boards, which they give to other directors. So let them make money on the other directors. Let me make all the money on my jobs. And I'm like, well, they ain't going to do that. And, so the answer is yes. You should go in with the belief that they want to sign you. They want you. This is not, there are a lot of directors out there, a lot of people that are available. They want you badly, usually. Now, again, there's nuances to that. If you're a new director, not billing anything, but if you're billing, they make money off of you. You're how they're going to get rich. Yeah. So they want you. Now, again, easier if you're billing 5 or 6 million. That's my job, is to say, and this is another issue that's happened in the business. For the directors who are billing, say, 2 or 3 million and less, the deals have gotten worse over the last 10 years. For the directors who are billing 6 or 8 million or more, they've gotten richer because there are fewer of them, and they're the ones that really the companies clean up on.
If you have 10 directors that bill 5 to 6, you're making that's 16 million.
Yeah, but if you only, there was a guy, I don't think the company's even around, a guy named David Tate, and he had I forgot the director's name. He was a really, really big director at the time. He was billing like 12 or 13 million. I think that David was making like a couple $1 million off of this one director. If you think about that, Yeah. A good director, you can bring in, you can put $1 million or $2 million into your bottom line of your company. That's not peanuts.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, companies will claim, well, we have huge overhead, and a lot of them, the older ones, do. They have big offices. They have offices on the East Coast and on the West Coast. They spend a lot more. Employees, a lot of employees, and that's one of the arguments. And again, that gets into nuances of there's calculations to the profit, and there's things called an overhead charge. The company takes out of the profit a certain amount that they put in their pocket to cover the cost of their operation. There's been a whole evolution in that particular concept. It's gotten incredibly large, in my opinion. The companies have been squeezed a lot. They're squeezing the directors. The changing of contracts has been rapid over the last few years. Frustrating for me at times, and at times it is what it is. I can't fight this whole industry.
Sure.
But as I tell people, I consider myself an advocate for the director, but I'm not an adversary to the company. It's just not how I work. I try to make it work. I try to be very respectful. They're risking a lot of money. This gets into be a big issue when it comes to executive producers' contracts. Their contracts can be very messy because they're running the company and they feel like they have a right to make a lot of money because they're creating the revenue, and the company owners, who sometimes are executive producers themselves, sometimes they're directors, they don't want to give up the money. They don't,
right.
Determining value is very difficult at times with executive producers.
I know we're running out of time.
Right. Oren, both you and I both have questions. I feel like
we have. Well, I really want to end with the numbers. Like I want to hear about. But before we get that, I have a question, and Matt has a question. My question, just before we finish up, is again, like I don't want. There's this thing about our podcast where like I don't really. Like sometimes a showrunner will come on the podcast and talk about a tone meeting and what that means, and having a meeting with the director. And it's like, you're talking about something that like 99.5% of directors will never get to have, Right. So I want to just hit one time on the topic that hits kind of a wider swath of directors, which is again, not the Tom Kuntz, the Dave Meyers, the Catherine Bigelow's, the Kim Garrigs, but more the directors that are maybe not DGA yet. They're about to be DGA. They've shot 50 commercials over the last 5 years, from budgets ranging from $50,000 to $350,000. Yeah. And they're trying to kind of make the next move to get profit sharing, to maybe join the DGA, to get better work. Is there any advice, like even as much as like how to find companies, like how to move your career forward and not kind of get stuck in this rut and see that there's all these directors getting these amazing deals, and like how do you break into that place where you're getting an offer?
It's a great question, and I'm not sure I really can answer it, to be honest. I won't lie to you. I'm just not sure, because I don't deal a lot with that. I tend to get them when they've been
You're
approached.
Further downstream.
Yeah, I'm further downstream is exactly the right answer. I think I can tell you that if you can create some quality work, obviously you need that first, be it through spec work, work you get friends together and you don't have to pay anybody to create. I've had clients actually who they started by actually kind of recreating a commercial that they saw, but maybe tweaking it a little bit, coming up with a different creative idea with the same product, an actual product. Again, documentaries are a very common way of getting short films, or another very common way. I think it's probably a calling somebody like a Raquel, because otherwise I don't really know. I don't think you get too many people who look at reels, unsolicited reels. Like agencies won't take unsolicited scripts. I don't know of too many companies that'll take unsolicited reels, but I mean, you do it online. Obviously, you send them an email. Maybe they would. I've never advised anybody in that regard. I wish I could help you more in that area, because that's just not where I typically get involved.
Have you had any clients that like had a short film win Sundance, and
yes,
but they don't have like really a 30-second commercial?
Yes, I have. Usually, I've had a few that have done that have either been honored or Sundance or some film, film
festival.
Thank you. That has been recognized, and usually somebody sees their work, the style of work, or the feel of it, and they get some interest there.
Yeah.
And again, that tends to be. I think the track usually tends to be somebody starts doing a little bit of non-union work. Keep in mind the cost of non-union work and union work is day and night. I mean, the average union day shoot is like $350,000 versus non-union, which is a third of that or less.
Sure.
So I think you get a lot of them who start doing some non-union work. They get a few spots there and they try to move up from there. And again, or they come from the TV world and have shot several episodes of a Breaking Bad or something like that. That is a particular look and style. So I wish I could help you more of that, because if that's probably a lot of your listeners.
Or even DPs turn directors or something.
Yeah, see, DPs may cut a reel of their work for a look. And they'll say, that's the look I create. I mean, that's, again, a director. Remember, there are a fair number of director cameramen. Who do their own jobs. I think Michael Lawrence does that, who does a lot of European work.
Yeah. Joe Pitka, right?
Joe Pitka, used to do that. So that's one of the questions I always ask: do you shoot your own work? And there are cameramen who now start directing. They don't shoot their own work. One, because a lot of times the agencies want a separate.
Their shoulder is tired.
Yeah, that's true too. So it's a great question. If I think of a better answer, I'll be happy to get back with you.
Sure. Well, our listeners, I'm sure, will appreciate it.
Yeah.
So my question, Scott, is really just I'm trying to tee you up for something that Oren said to me when we were talking about having you on the show. It boils down to essentially that nice guy mentality that we were describing before, and how we set our rates, right? Because everyone's kind of got a day rate, but like I'll say for me, I always have a conversation with the company of like, okay, well, what's the actual budget? How much is going to be on screen? I'm willing to take a pay cut if we need to, because I want the work to be great, right? To your point of everyone wants to make great work. So like if I'm making a huge payday and there's not enough to like actually bring the vision to life, then what am I doing? Why bother in the first place? Right.
Sure.
But Oren, you brought up a point that I think was really quite profound, and I think is going to be meaningful for listeners, about the way that agencies make their final decision, right? In terms of falling in love with the director, not the number, right? Like on jobs that we're describing, we're talking about, significant budgets, millions of dollars, right? Yeah.
Or even a couple hundred.
Or even a couple hundred thousand, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But, like over the course of whatever. The point being, if we're quibbling like, should the rate be 12.5 or 15 or 20? I don't know. Like, I don't know what should it be. You told Oren that they're not thinking about that. Like no one's we saved $3,000 on this guy's rate. We're going to go with the director we like less.
100%. If you're kind of I ask the same question. I make the same statement to every director. If you're an agency creative whose job is on the line, or producer, and you're going to hand $1 million to a company to shoot a 3-day commercial, are you going to say, wait, that guy gets 20 and that guy gets 25, so it's $15,000 more, so I'm going to go with the guy who I'm paying $15,000 less, but I don't think he'll do quite as good job? There's no way in hell that that's going to be the basis for the decision. It is, who's the best director? If we need to pay a fraction more for the director, we'll do it. Now, that being said, the company may come to you and say, look, you want to do the job, we want to do the job. Our markup is being squeezed. We need you to bring down your rate because we're reducing what we're going to make. We want you to reduce what you're going to make. In every contract I negotiate, there is a set day rate. And in the contract, every contract says the same thing. The director gets $20,000 a day or $25,000 a day. However, the company can reduce the day rate as long as it gets the approval from the director. And if a director's smart, and again, they don't do this, but they should say, well, are you asking me to reduce that rate because you're reducing your markup, your fees? And they should say yes. And that's 99% of the time what happens. Day rates are, and again, they're not that complicated because for commercials, for newer directors, the day rates run between 10 and 15,000. For directors with a few years experience, between 15 and 18. To be honest with you, 20,000 has become like the new average. Mm-hmm. I know directors who have very limited amount of work and are being offered 20,000 a day. And 25 is certainly not unusual at all. I have a director I just did a deal for now. He was at 20 in his last deal. He just went up to 25. No agency is going to not hire a director because of 25 a day or 20 a day. If they don't, I mean, I just can't picture anybody on the agency side saying, you know what, we don't want to pay that director this money. Mm-hmm. He's the one that's directing. You're the one that's hiring. He's the most important person on the entire process. That's where you're going to skimp. Sure. So I think now, just so you know, non-union commercials, it's funny enough, directors can make more money on those as a percentage of the job because most commercial non-DGA jobs, they get 10% of the budget. So if you have a $200,000 commercial and you're making 20 grand, that may be more than you would make if it was a one-day commercial, because you may only get 12 or 15,000 for directing that, and you may or may not get any profit sharing. It depends. But 10% for a non-union commercial is typically what we see. I don't ever see directors making less than 10 a day on a union job. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, you'd have to know the budget, which leads to another whole conversation, another whole discussion, which is directors' complete lack of knowledge about how the industry they work in and how they get paid work. They have no idea how they make money. I like that statement without any reservation or fear of insulting any directors out there.
No, you're very correct about that. Can I ask you, when you say a non-union shoot, let's say it's a $150,000 budget, you say 10%.
10%, 15 grand is what a director will get.
So that's not after the production company takes its fee. No, that's not A through K.
It's like a music video. It's inclusive of everything. So if the entire cost of the job is $150,000, they will get 15. 150, they'll get 15. Like music videos, I assume you guys may or may not know this. The director's fee is 10% of the video. So if it's a $500,000, he'll get 50,000. The production company,
whether it's a day, one shoot day or 5 shoot days.
And by the way, there are a lot of exceptions to that. I'm not going to go into why they happen, but there's a term called FFBO. So it stands for fixed fees based on. You can have a $500,000 video where the fees are only based on $350,000. I know that sounds weird, and your viewers probably don't, or your listeners probably don't have to worry about that. But I mean, Dave Meyer still does a lot of videos, and the video business isn't anywhere near what it used to be. Nobody even wants to do videos because it's too easy to lose money. But again, these are some nuances. But I think my biggest complaint is that directors have no idea, and more important, and this one completely flabbergasts me. You're partners in something, right? Mm-hmm. You are partners with the production company in a job. Yet, does any director ever ask to see the financial layout on that job?
Sure.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
And I'm going, so you're totally trusting the company to do everything properly and tell you the truth on everything. Yeah. And that's foolish. And I'm not saying they don't, by and large. I don't want any production company here to say I'm telling directors companies are out to screw them. But look at, if I were if I were your business partner, I would want to know, how are you keeping the books?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Show me the budget.
Let me see what's going on here. What is this? What budget do I have to work with here? But they don't, because they're right brain people. They're not left brain people, and they don't care about this stuff. You're not in it. You don't think of it in terms of what kind of money am I going to make? I mean, you think of it, but it's not your focus. Your focus is to make a good piece of film.
I used to say, I went to film school, so I didn't have to look at spreadsheets. And I look at a lot of spreadsheets now.
It's amazing because I've argued this for years, that most entertainers are actually fairly intelligent people. It's a tough business. You have to have a certain outlook in life, though. It's a little different. You have to look from something I've always wanted to write a book on, which is you have to be an eternal optimist to be in your business. Because if you had your door shut in your face every day and you never know if you're going to have a job tomorrow, how do you live with that? I couldn't. That's why I had an office in a company. I like.
Well, welcome to Just Shoot It, Scott.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's like, what's the psychology? Think about that. What's the psychology of your industry? You guys wake up going, gee, am I going to be able to pay my bills tomorrow? Great. What a life I have. Doesn't everybody want to be me?
Yeah. And not to state the obvious, but the name of the podcast is kind of about trying to take some control of your own career, and not waiting for people to.
It's hard. And you unfortunately just don't. There's so much that's out of your control. During the pandemic, the interesting part of the pandemic was that people were really having trouble. Why? Because now all the feature and TV guys, or the DGA strike, I should say, they go, oh, well, you know what? We can't do TV or film, so let's go do commercials.
We're still feeling it. We're still feeling it. Like it's just now like, okay, people are back to work. So like,
big article in today's LA Times about that the whole business seems to have, it's still not anywhere near what it used to be.
Yeah, it's contracted.
People have, and then AI is becoming there was a controversy about a director who borrowed some film from some other directors recently, shot a whole new or edited a whole new commercial out of the work of several other directors. And I guess the other directors were pissed, even though they don't realize they don't own their footage. So, that's another thing commercial directors don't realize. They don't own the footage. It's owned by the client. So they're like, can I use that? Can I do something? No, it's owned by the client. They're not going to. So it's I sometimes have to explain these things to directors, but
the last number I was going to ask you about, because I think you covered all the important ones, is if someone wants to hire you, is that you?
Yeah, I charge an hourly rate. I'm happy to mention it. I charge $3.95 an hour for my time. Contracts, it's funny. I tell directors, and I think it's probably why I get the amount of referrals I do. We're not talking about something that costs $5,000 or $10,000. It could cost a few thousand. It depends. I can do a contract. If a company gives me a contract, I can make all my notes, get it done in 3, 4, 5 hours. On the other hand, I've had contracts that have been. I think when I did something for was it Daniel Wolf. I spent months working on his damn contract. Now he's got his own company, but some contracts take a long time. Some take a few hours. So, and as I did say to you, you get 1,000 times benefit of whatever you pay me. Right. Now, don't call tomorrow because I have 2 doctor's appointments tomorrow. So I have a busy day. But again, I'm here to help. I'm happy to help, and I will talk to clients. I often will talk to clients on the first call. I don't usually charge. I'll spend some time and give you some idea of what I think you can expect and how much time. The other thing too is the companies don't move nearly as fast as I do because they have a whole bureaucracy. They have to go through an executive producer, an owner, a CFO, a CEO, their CPAs potentially. So these things can take a few weeks. That's one of the things I always have to warn people. Doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah,
but
makes sense.
And I know the personalities of a lot of the companies. That's something I always feel I can bring to the table. They all tend to have, there's oddly enough, certain accounting departments that are top notch, others that are a little sloppy with their work. There are errors made all the time, rarely to the benefit of the director.
Sure.
Right. Little things like that. But that's it. It's. I enjoy it. It's a very fun. It's a very incestuous small industry. Everybody knows everybody, by and large. Everybody's aware of everybody else's work, and I think I will say one thing, and I say this to filmmakers, feature and TV people. It's one thing to be handed $100 million budget and have several months to film, a story. It's quite another thing to tell a story in 30 seconds. That's a skill. That's a real skill. That's why I think a lot of people who do commercials like it, because it's not easy. And you're given a very tight timeline. You're given a very small amount of money to tell a story, and sometimes in 10 seconds. That's a skill. That's a definite skill that very few people are good at. So I leave you with those thoughts.
Well, I'm sure people will be clamoring to know how to find you. Should they just Google Scott Feinstein?
Yeah, they can always just Google me, whatever. It's very simple. It's Scott You're going to laugh. I just forgot my email. That's embarrassing. Scott@FeinsteinConsulting.com. So it's Scott Feinstein last name, then the consulting.com. You can always get me through there. And I return every email and phone call the same day. Always done that.
You are quite responsive.
Yeah, I try to be. It's something I grew up, always have been that way. When I started my company 40 years ago, I was always that way.
Well, Scott, do you have just a minute or two more to endorse with us?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure, no problem.
Unpaid endorsements.
Well, my unpaid endorsement is totally apropos of this conversation. Have either of you two seen Tom Kuntz's new Carl's Jr. spot? It's an MJZ spot. I swear I walked into this conversation thinking about it. I think it just dropped today. It is so bonkers and so funny. And Oren, when you see it, you'll be like, "Oh my god, I would love to do this spot." Basically, just to spoil the whole thing, a guy's he's like having his car getting worked on, and there's a TV in the corner with a Carl's Jr. commercial playing, and it basically hypnotizes him. He becomes crazed. He wants to all he can think about is a Carl's Jr. beef burger. And so he just starts babbling beef burger and just kind of saying these crazy things. And he tears the phone off of the wall. The mechanic is like, "Oh, you need a new bumper." And he literally climbs up the mechanic dives into his car. And he's like, "I gotta get a burger, beef burger. Starts his car when it's up on the jack, up on the conveyor belt, 10 feet in the air. It crashes down. He shatters. He keeps driving. He crashes through the wall of Carl's Jr., leans out of the window and eats a burger. Just pandemonium. So funny. So that's my endorsement, that Carl's Jr. commercial. Scott, what you got, buddy?
I'm into cars. I want to buy a very expensive car. It's insanely expensive, but I'm a lover of cars. And there's a new Lamborghini that's coming out that's a hybrid. It's a gas and electric. It's an SUV.
Oh, so I think I saw one at the Americana. Or is it out yet already?
It's not. They just displayed it a couple weeks ago. But so the whole fight in the family is my daughter and wife are saying, if you buy a car like that, it has to be colorful. And it should be like orange or red. Because Dad, we all know if you buy a Lamborghini, you're a douche. So you have to lean into it. You have to lean into it, exactly. Yeah. And I said, but I don't want to be looked at that way. And she goes, Dad, if you buy that kind of car, that means you do want to be looked at that way. I said, no, I'm buying the car because I really like the power of the car and the fact that it's a hybrid. I'm now doing the environment. And she goes, bull. I said, so they have one it's called Balloon and it's white, but it's like a pearl white. And it's beautiful. He goes, Dad, they don't just look like every other car. That's so not so off-putting. So that's the only story I can think of at the moment.
I want to make sure it's the Lamborghini Urus.
Yes, Urus. That's what it is. And it's a beautiful car. It's absolutely, and it's got 800 horsepower. If you're into cars, if any of you guys are into cars, they know 800 horsepower and almost 1,000 foot-pounds of torque make this thing like a rocket ship for an SUV. How could you not love that?
Kaplan, what you got, buddy?
My endorsement is the polar opposite of Scott's endorsement. My daughter and I have been getting into a very ancient game recently. Mancala. Do you guys know that game?
I remember that as with my kids. Yeah. I used to play with my daughters as a kid.
That's really fun.
Little ball.
Little pebbles.
Pebbles. Yeah, it's been around for years.
Yeah, I think it's thousands. I think it's older than chess and stuff. It's so simple, and it I used to play backgammon as a kid with my parents and stuff, growing up in the Middle East. But it's even more simple than that, but there's more strategy. I think it's more fun than checkers. There's a strategy, and there's the visceral kind of feeling of picking up these things, and very young kids can learn how to play it because it's just kind of counting. And there's a couple of rules on picking up stones, and it's a really fast game. You can do a round in about 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll play 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds, just in the evening, and it's incredibly fun. And we just my parents were over a couple nights ago, and we're like, oh, let's teach the grandparents how to play Mancala. They never played it before. And my stepdad was playing he just made up a totally different strategy, and it worked. He kept beating us, and I'm kind of discovering new ways to play it.
That's cool.
Even though it's so simple. So it's fun. I mean, my daughter is 8. I think probably like kid would probably need to be at least 6 to kind of figure out the mechanics of how it works. But it's really fun. I'm really loving it. And you could literally make them if somebody gave me a piece of paper, I can make and a pen, maybe without even a pen, I can make a Mancala board out of like, you just need 24 things. And like 12 or I guess 14 kind of holes that you put.
Aren't they like marbles? Aren't they kind of marbles?
Yeah, the traditional one is marbles, but you could even do it with like pennies. You know, if you had like a jar of change, you could make that into a Mancala set. So anyhow.
The important thing is you're doing something with your child, and are you cheating to beat her? Tell us the truth. Come on, tell us the truth. She beats you.
I'm in a place now where I can mostly play for real. I will still be like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And then she'll rewind, like, "Oh, okay, never mind."
Sure. No. She'll see it. Yeah, that's fun.
Enjoy them at that age, because in a few years they will be beating you, because they will be smarter than you, and they will be talking down to you, and then you'll want to kill them. Yeah. That's the progression of children.
Honestly, Scott, of all the things I've learned from you in the relatively short time I've known you, I think one of the most valuable ones was Scott told me today that his daughters are, one's a lawyer, right? They're done with college. They're kind of adults. Do you still talk to them like all the time?
I talk to them. I talked to my older daughter. She's a lawyer. My young one's a doctor. I talked to my older one today 3 times today already. She called me today to tell me she learned a new way to bill her clients. It makes her more money.
Yeah, I dream.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
I laughed hard when she told me. I said, she goes, Dad, I felt guilty billing. Like, if I work on something for only 2 minutes, I just felt bad about billing 6 minutes, which is the increments most of us bill for. And I said, Rachel, you shouldn't feel bad for it, because then if you don't bill every time you do 2 minutes worth of work. So I talk to my kids. My older one almost every day, and my younger one several days a week. Yeah.
I was telling my wife about that, and she's like, "Oh, you're going to be like that with Winter, with our daughter."
You want to?
No, I'm excited. I'm so scared that like my kids, especially my daughter, will not want to talk to me when she's a teenager.
Well,
yeah.
Just keep talking to them, and they will.
Awesome.
Don't let them not talk to you. That's what my kids would be pissed, and I'm like, no, you still have to talk to me. You don't be all you want, but you're going to talk to me.
Yeah.
So you'll learn.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If you all have any questions for us that you want us to forward on to Scott, or have any opinions, please email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. You can find us across all social media at justshootitpod, on Instagram at okaplan.
And I'm at Mr. Matt Enlow across all social media. This episode was edited by Noah Bayshore, thanks Noah, and produced by him as well, along with additional producing by Tyler Small. You're listening to music provided by the Free Music Archive and the artist Jazar. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.